locked in.
Look at what we have here, folks.
To the only show that matters.
The cream of the crop.
Duke loves wrestling.
And there is no one that does it better than
your host.
I have come here to chew bubblegum and kick ass.
The Duke.
And I'm all out of bubblegum.
Hi, this is Earl Oliver from Sully's Vintage Wrestling.
This is Raj Giri with WrestlingInc.com.
This is Sean Reed, boxing writer and undercover low-key wrestling fan, and you're listening to Duke Loves Wrestling. Woo!
Hi, this is Ed Cannell.
And this is Matt Enton. And we are Suspicious Behavior Productions, creators of Invasion from Planet Wrestletopia.
Yes, you are. And let me tell you something, folks.
Brother,
I am not a comic book guy. Okay, let me just admit that up front. Okay, I was a TV kid. I was sitting there making sure I got all my chores done and my homework done so I could watch wrestling. I was a big wrestling guy. I loved cartoons. When it came to comic books, it just, the bug didn't bite me as hard as it did most of my peers. But I got to tell you something. Invasion from Planet Wrestletopia by far is my favorite comic that I've ever read. And yes, I've read some of those rare X-Men and Superman and all these other things here. Invasion from Planet Wrestletopia, everybody listening, I need you at the end of this interview, okay? Check out the comments that I put in there in the description. You definitely want to get your hands, or get your eyes, I should say, on Invasion from Planet Wrestletopia. Legitimately the best wrestling comic you will ever enjoy reading. The artwork is spectacular, and I'm just really excited to have Ed and Matt here this week just to share some information about the comic. So first and foremost, and we'll start with you, Ed. Ed, are you a wrestling fan? Because this comic is very wrestling specific. So you got to tell me here, what are your credentials in terms of pro wrestling?
So I'm a little bit older than Matt here, my co-writer and co-creator. I'm 47, and I grew up as a kid in the 70s and 80s, obsessed with wrestling. And that was the time of, I grew up in Portland, Oregon. I was born and raised here, and at an early age discovered we had this NWA territory, Pacific Northwest Wrestling. And so even before cable, I was able to tune in Saturday nights and watch, the likes of Jesse Ventura and Roddy Piper and Playboy Buddy Rose on my local, Channel 12. And I grew from there. And then stayed kind of obsessed with wrestling through, Ric Flair and Hulkamania and all that stuff. And I did, sort of fall out of it at one point because I was of the, generation of fans where when kayfabe kind of went away, it was a little bit like finding out that Santa Claus, wasn't real. Only worse. And then, it was hard after that to sort of keep going, right? Because you started off as a little kid thinking it's real, and then it's not. So it was hard for me, and though I still love it, and I still love it. I have a ton of warm feelings towards it. These days, I don't watch wrestling regularly. I keep up with it and kind of keep up with what's going on. But my obsession with it was primarily through the 70s and 80s.
What about yourself? What about yourself there, Matt? I mean, again, what are your credentials with pro wrestling? Because this comic is so specific to the wrestling experience. Were you a wrestler, or you have some kind of connection with wrestling that allowed you to create something so specific?
Well, if you saw my physique, you would see I'm definitely not cut out to be a wrestler.
Manager.
But no, I've been a fan ever since I was about maybe 5 years old. I was the perfect age to sort of, catch the cresting wave of Hulkamania / the sort of like the rock and wrestling era. We didn't have cable when I was a kid, so I got whatever I could, which usually meant, Saturday mornings, Hulk Hogan's Rock and Wrestling, and then Saturday night's Main Event on, I believe it was NBC at the time. And then our local affiliate would have Glow on Saturdays as well. And then, of course, in high school, we got cable, and the Attitude Era was just sort of dawning. So, I remained like a pretty consistent viewer up through maybe sort of the early 2000s. And then my sort of viewing habits fell off. But, my sort of like warm, fuzzy feelings for wrestling have sort of never gone away. Like Ed, I still keep on top of what's happening in the industry, in my news feed. And, I'm just like a sucker for any wrestling content. So of course I've just been devouring Dark Side of the Ring and any of like the WWE network documentaries that they've been putting out. Whatever content they're going to put out there, about wrestling, particularly from the time I was viewing it, which would be sort of mid 80s through the early 2000s. I'm all about it.
That's great stuff there. That's great stuff. And it's funny that you both mentioned things that stuck out to me that I believe definitely influenced your comic here. Ed, you mentioned Hot Rod Roddy Piper, the Hall of Famer. Yeah. And, when you talk about the Pacific Territory, I mean, he spent so much time in Oregon, and I believe at one point he was the head booker up there, what have you. He's definitely the main attraction. I actually had his daughter, Teal Piper, who is now a wrestler. Yeah. She was on Duke Loves Wrestling podcast last year, and you'll get a kick out of this, Matt. The creator of Glow, he was on this show.
Oh, no way.
And now he runs WoW Superheroes. He and the owner of the Los Angeles Lakers, they run WoW Superheroes, which, Ed, is the promotion that Teal Piper is a wrestler in. So David McLean is his name. He was the guy who created Gorgeous Ladies of Wrestling, and he's the guy that runs WoW Superheroes, Women of Wrestling Superheroes, and Roddy Piper's daughter wrestles for him. So it's just funny how a lot of this stuff comes full circle when we talk about influences and we get into this great comic that you guys have, Invasion from Planet Wrestletopia.
Yeah, Piper was so great, and he lived in a suburb of Portland called Aloha, and it's wasn't unusual to meet people maybe who bumped into him, and anytime you met someone who had a personal story about meeting Piper or even being like I met somebody who was his wife was one of Roddy Piper's lawyers for something. Fantastic guy. Like you never heard anything but what a great guy he was. And so he got the Portland territory, the Pacific Northwest territory was not the first place he'd ever wrestled as a young up and comer, but it was Don Owens, the owner of Portland Wrestling, who really thought that Piper had what it took to be a major star, and actually sent Piper, I think, to Georgia Championship Wrestling, the biggest NWA promotion at the time, and said, "Look, you gotta take this Piper kid on. He's going to be huge." Piper never forgot what the Owens family sort of did for him, and even at the height of his WWF at the time popularity, Hulkamania and all that stuff, when the WWF, as they were known at the time, would come to Portland, Piper told McMahon, "I will never wrestle in Portland because I just won't do that to the Owens family." So I did get to see him wrestle live, but it was because Piper would still, even under contract with Vince McMahon, would occasionally come back and wrestle for Don Owens. It was very unusual, but he would like wrestle Playboy Buddy Rose in the main event, and I got to see one of those main events and see him wrestle, not against Hogan or against Jimmy Snuka or something like that, but against NWA and AWA stars at the time.
it's crazy because you never know how all of this stuff is connected one way or another. So let's just jump right into this here, because issue 1, A Date with Destiny from Invasion from Planet Wrestletopia. What was it that you folks were trying to accomplish with this first issue here? The amount of pages, I was very surprised, pleasantly surprised at how many pages this episode was. It wasn't a short read, so it gave me a chance to really get used to this universe, so to speak, and get familiar with some of these main characters here. But talk to me about it. We'll start with you there, Ed. What was it that you guys were trying to accomplish with this? And then Matt, you can jump in at any time on that as well. With this first issue, what were you trying to go for here?
Our main goal for this whole series was really, we love this story and we want to get it out there into the world. The first issue is 32 pages, and it definitely, sets the tone, and we tried to do the setup in as interesting and funny way as possible. And then it ends on sort of a cliffhanger, in which our protagonist has really screwed over the entire planet, and we find out at the end of the issue just how bad it's going to get. So it's a little bit longer because we wanted to set the tone for the series and introduce the characters and do all those things you're supposed to do, but we also wanted to make sure we had enough in there to really get the reader hooked on the promise of the premise of this series, and get them excited for the next issue, and really the next 5 issues, where the train really gets rolling down the tracks and things get really exciting.
Yeah, we like the first issue is longer because we really sort of wanted to establish the protagonist, Rory Landell. We wanted to establish sort of his psychology, who he is now. And because this is not just a series. Yes, it's about an invasion of alien pro wrestlers, but it's also about Rory's like real life sort of heel to face turn. And we really want to kind of dig deep into his psychology. And like a lot of these would start off like super, super action packed, and we decided to kind of more explore our characters in that first issue, and just sort of give a little hint of the premise, right at the end.
That's a great description there, and certainly, at least with me, you got me hooked right away. So I got to ask, though, because throughout everything that I've seen so far, right, your first 5 issues, the lingo, it's clear that you guys have been influenced, and when we talk about Roddy Piper and the gorgeous ladies of wrestling and some of these things here, it's clear you've been influenced by people who really do a good job of communicating with the audience, who can speak on the mic, or who can, give these great promos and what have you. So Matt, let me start with you here. Where did that come from? Because the writing in the comic is so strong. It is just incredible. Are you known as somebody who has the gift of gab, or where did you guys get this from?
No, I mean, thankfully, so much of wrestling history has been documented on YouTube. So we just watch the hell out of promos, and we're sort of trying to figure out who his like ring, Rory's ring persona was. And I will tell you, I have just infinite respect for the great talkers, just because like those were probably the most difficult things to write. And little preview, we have another Rory promo in the last issue, but there's so much batting back and forth trying to perfect it, because in order for it to come off as realistic, it both has to be, has to hook you, but also has to almost sound off the cuff and improvise, which is something really difficult to capture, on the printed page like this.
Yeah, and I would add that even as a kid, I want to say early 80s, I was old enough to go to used bookstores, right? I was really obsessed with the wrestling magazines of the time. And the wrestling magazines were great because they were total kayfabe all the way. You even had heel columnist in the wrestling magazine, and then the wrestling magazines just took it very seriously. And Matt and I, we bought a bunch of those old wrestling magazines when we were doing this. A lot of which I had owned in the past, So we did a lot of research, of course, into how these guys talk, deliver promos. I was as a young fan, particularly obsessed with Georgia Championship Wrestling when cable was brand new, and my family got it pretty early on. Now the whole nation could watch Superstation WTBS from Atlanta. A lot of people think that McMahon was the first one to kind of go national with it, but it was Superstation WTBS, which had just been a local station in Atlanta. Now, kind of through no fault of their own, was a national cable channel, and you could watch 3 hours of Georgia Championship Wrestling, NWA territory down there in Atlanta. Also, by happenstance, the home base of Ric Flair, the world champion. So you saw Ric Flair cutting promos every Saturday, and Michael Hayes and just all those guys, and it was just great. I love those old promos and the way Ric Flair worked the mic and all that stuff. So our love for all that stuff is in the comic book, obviously.
One of the things that jumps out and is established right from the beginning, the quality of the artwork. I mean, legitimately, the way that your team has captured the action scenes, especially. Of course, you have the sound effects in there as well when somebody's hitting somebody, which is really cool to see. But talk to me about the artwork itself, and how the heck is the artwork so strong? I mean, legitimately, I told you guys this offline. When I first started looking into this, I did not expect to be blown away as much as I am, especially by the artwork. It's as good artwork as I've seen in any comic, which somebody has to have some kind of experience with this sort of thing, because it's not something that was just slapped together. I mean, this is professional work here, guys.
Yeah, a lot of these indie comics, because, our first 2 issues were self-published, they suffer from, a lack of professionalism. You can tell they're self-published. And for us, it was just vital that we put together, because our experiences in video games, it's not in comics. We wanted to assemble a team with a lot of experience under their belts. So for the first 3 issues, we have Dan Scaffidi doing the art, and then Kendall Good took over art duties for the remaining 3 issues. And Dan, we had seen Dan's art in other things he'd done. He did a run on Will Eisner's The Spirit, and he'd done some Battlestar Galactica comics. And there was just that like larger than life cartoonish quality to his work, and those crisp lines that we thought would just, work so perfectly with the characters and the type of story we wanted to tell. And what was interesting with Dan is, like, he knew nothing about wrestling whatsoever. So Ed, kind of had to, put together sort of a care package of wrestling magazines and DVDs and sent it to him so he could sort of self-educate before he embarked on this little journey with us. And Dan says we converted him, over after he had spent, a month watching wrestling DVDs and everything. Like, he sort of came out of it with like a newfound respect for the art form. And then go ahead.
No, I was just saying, but to your point, I mean, we hired professionals to do this. Everything from the Dan Scaffidi did the initial art for the first 3 issues. Marissa Louise is a professional colorist, done a lot of work for like Marvel, like DC, Dark Horse. Led the lettering for those first 3 issues was called Larger World Studios, but it's Dave Lamphere who does the lettering, and so we went professional all the way. We're going to do this right, and the results speak for themselves. Now it's hard to keep an art team together, even though everyone's getting paid. I think for sort of an indie small press project, it's hard to keep a creative team together because everyone's a freelancer. So you have Jason Lewis doing the colors for the 4th issue, did a great job, and then for the 5th and 6th issues, you have help me out here, Matt. You have
Geo Butler.
Geo Butler doing the colors. She's amazing. The last 2, and then Kendall Good took over the art duties for issues 4 through 6. Kendall had already done a lot of work for the WWE comics that Boom puts out. The SmackDown series, I believe they're known as. So he had already done a lot of comic book art for wrestling comics, which was great. So when we lost Dan, we were able to just transition with him, and he already had a ton of wrestling knowledge. And Sal Cipriano, we have a new letterer for the last issue. So it's not like we fired everybody and then replaced them all. It just they drift to other projects and get really busy, and so you have to just soldier on with the best people you can find. But all the issues look great. We're really proud of what all the artists did.
Well, that's an interesting tale there, because the quality of the artwork never dropped off. So if you never told me that you were using different people in later issues than you were in the beginning, I would have never known that, because it all is just top-notch, high-quality stuff. So kudos to you guys for finding the right people to keep this consistent, and kudos to the artists themselves, because really, I'm telling you, it doesn't matter what quality your steak is. It could be the rare, most beautiful piece of whatever. If it doesn't look good, people aren't going to be interested in it. And this whole comic series just looks incredible. I mean, just really, really good stuff. Invasion from Planet Wrestletopia, once again, is the name of the comic, folks. And, these guys really should be commended for the job that they've done with this thing here. Now, I got to ask, and I guess I'll start with you there, Ed, the characters themselves, because you definitely have a pretty cool roster here. I'm a little partial to Macho, pretty interesting. Because I'm not the tallest guy in the world, but I can make it happen out there. So the fact that Macho was out there kicking butt is pretty cool. Talk to us about that, though. Talk to us about some of these characters that you guys came up with and what have you, and what kind of fun. And what I really want to know is, did you put yourselves or people that in there? Is there any kind of qualities that maybe that Ed or Matt or some of these other folks possess that you kind of slid in there? There might be some Easter eggs, I'm sure.
So it's interesting. Almost all these wrestlers, these main sort of the more important characters, whether it's Rory Landell, the protagonist, or even some of the minor characters who are wrestlers, they're really more of an amalgam of all these different wrestlers who we just thought were really great and admired and thought were really fun. So Rory, we hear a lot of different people who read the comic say, "Boy, Rory reminds me of," and we've heard, Randy Macho Man Savage, Hulk Hogan, we've heard Ric Flair, we've heard all kinds of names, and they're kind of all right. Superstar Billy Graham was a big influence. Not really so much people we know, but wrestlers that we know, or wrestlers we think we know, and that's true for really just about all the wrestlers in the book. Mini Macho, he is a favorite of a lot of people, and he's funny. He's the one character that we didn't really have a lot of plans for when we started writing, and he was just kind of going to be in the first issue possibly, and that's it. But we kind of fell in love with him, and we're like, he's got to tag along on this adventure. He's got to be a part of it. So he got to be in his character. We made a bigger deal out of his character than we planned. No, we're not really in the book. There's a brief cameo where you can see Matt and I reacting to Rock and Roll Rory Landell's big speech when he declares himself Galactic Champion of the Universe. We're the the two losers who are at home watching the pay-per-view on their couch eating,
stuffing our faces.
That's about it. That's about all you'll see of us, which is good for the comic. The less you see of us in the comic, the better.
Yeah, and let me just say, rock and roll Roy Mandel, Taz did that way before you, pal, and so did the $1 Million Man, creating his own championship and declaring himself champion. I thought that was pretty clever, the way he did that, to stick it to the promoter, so to speak, with a championship that was even cooler than the homemade championship, so to speak, for the promotion. So I thought that was really interesting there. Matt, what do you add to that, though? Some of these characters, did you have any influence over, possibly sliding yourself in there somehow, some way?
I don't really, I don't think any of them are really a reflection of me per se. We really, we did collectively between the two of us, we probably read somewhere between 40 and 50 books about the industry. A majority of those were these, especially during sort of the late 90s through like mid 2000s, there were just a glut of wrestler autobiographies. So we read tons of those and highlighted, the hell out of them. And they really, like Ed said, superstar Billy Graham was sort of an influence on Rory's ring persona, and maybe Jake Roberts was an influence on him as like a person and in his own life. But it just became this kind of like brew of all these different influences until our original inspirations were sort of unrecognizable. I mean, obviously, like Dick Drazen was inspired by Vince McMahon. I think with some of the characters, the influences are a little more obvious. Like 3D started out as the Dudleys, but then they sort of turned into their own thing. So the idea was that we would use real world wrestlers as an influence, and then see how we could sort of depart from that initial influence until they sort of became their own persona unto themselves.
Yeah, I will say that, in some respects, I think the emotional stories that we're telling, is maybe where, as a writer, you have to put some of your own stuff in there that So I can very much relate to Rory constantly shooting himself in the foot as a person, until he sort of gets his head on straight. That I have some experience with, so that some of that, I drew from to put into the comic book, and I'm sure Matt has some of that in there as well. But as Matt kind of hinted at earlier, we are not wrestlers, and we're so far, we're writers, and we're so far removed from that life, so we really had to draw upon our fandom growing up and tons of source material to really kind of make sure we captured wrestlers accurately, lovingly, but warts and all, if that makes sense.
Oh, it sure does. And I can tell you that reading the comics and especially watching Rory's journey, one of the things that comes to mind, other than the various wrestling books, I mean, obviously Have a Nice Day by Mick Foley, Ric Flair's book, I can see the influences that you guys are talking about. But the movie, The Wrestler, clearly one of you or both of you or anyone else who worked on this project, they watched the movie The Wrestler, because there's a little bit of that in there as well, which
for sure.
That I find really, really interesting.
There are some parallels. I mean, we did not intentionally, of course, want to take from that film in particular. The wrestlers, as we are now finding out through Dark Side of the Ring and the many, ghost-written autobiographies, they have the fall is pretty. It's a long fall from wrestling superstardom to obscurity, and a lot of wrestlers have tragic lives. So that story, I think that story was maybe even kind of before we even watched The Wrestler, which I loved. I thought it was a great movie. That whole sort of story was, I think, somewhat familiar if you were really paying attention to wrestling.
Yeah, we wrote a screenplay for this over 10 years ago.
Okay.
And I think we were originally going to pitch it as a movie, and I think we had the first draft written right around the time The Wrestler came out. And I remember being excited about it, but also being nervous. I'm like, how much is, our story's going to overlap? Obviously, it's not about an invasion of alien pro wrestlers, but like, how similar is Randy the Ram going to be to Rock and Roll Rory? And while there are definitely parallels, because I think, a lot of wrestlers unfortunately have a very, kind of follow the same path. I thought we sort of diverged enough so nobody could accuse us of it's the wrestler with sci-fi trappings.
Oh, absolutely. You guys, you did a great job of making it your own. But like you said, unfortunately, so many wrestlers have gone through these challenges in life, and even people just in regular walks of life. Ed, you were very honest about that in your own life. People can relate to what's in this, which is what I really like. It's not silly. It's fun. It's entertaining, but it doesn't insult your intelligence, which is so cool. And again, folks, it's the reason why I'm telling you right now, you want to get your eyes on Invasion from Planet Wrestletopia. It is just fantastic, the entire series that's available to you right now. Matt, earlier you mentioned something that is really interesting, and I want to circle back to that real quick. You said that you folks have experience in video games. So specifically, what is your experience in video games? Are you writing games? Are you one of the animators? Like, what are you doing with video games, and how has that influenced this comic? And Ed, you can jump in any time on that as well.
So so Ed and I met in the video game industry. We both got hired for our first jobs in the industry by a studio in suburban Chicago called High Voltage. And I want to say, Ed, you were initially hired as a producer, correct? But you quickly transitioned to a designer role.
Yeah. By the time Matt came aboard, I was working as a game designer. We weren't working. The company wasn't working on games at that time that had a lot of writing necessarily. But when we started working on Leisure Suit Larry, Magna Cum Laude, all of a sudden we had to do a ton of writing, and we had to try to make it funny. And that's why Matt was hired. And they sat him down. This is early 2000s, and they sat him down right next to me, and that's how we met.
And of course, we did talk about wrestling because Ed had a picture of himself with King Kong Bundy and an autographed Playboy Buddy Rose photo above his desk. So we both, in that, discovered our mutual love of wrestling that way. But yeah, so we Leisure Suit Larry title was the first game we ever worked on. We subsequently worked on a sequel that unfortunately got canceled. And since then, I have had 2 other full-time jobs in the industry just as a writer or narrative director. The titles, depending on the company, change. But a majority of our work has been as just freelance contractors. And sometimes we collaborate, sometimes we work independently. As a team, we've done a few titles for a studio down in Austin called Twisted Pixel. We did a game called Comic Jumper and another game called Loco Cycle for them. And in fact, we ended up writing a horror, a comedy slasher movie for 2 of the founders of Twisted Pixel. So we have 1 movie under our belts as well. We've also done some work for Ubisoft. We did a World War I game called Valiant Hearts. Ed has worked on like 70 plus titles. He's worked on a lot more games than I have. Coming out very soon, May 22nd, we have Maneater, which is described by Tripwire, who is the developer, as a shark PG. And I did most of the writing with a big assist from Ed on that. And we're currently writing on the Goldbergs Back to the 80s, which is a mobile game title.
Wow. So you guys definitely have a lot of experience in the video gaming world, and you're wrestling fans, as you admit freely. Ed, you got your autographed pictures and everything else for everybody. So there's no confusion, all right? You're dealing with a wrestling fan here, folks. Just in case anybody in the office, whether they wanted to know or not, they're going to know that Ed was a wrestling fan. And Matt, you jumped on that bandwagon as well and waved your wrestling flag since Ed was out there so boisterous about it. But that's what we love. And as wrestling fans and folks listening to the show, these guys are legitimate. And one of the things that was very important to me is that the comic was respectful of pro wrestling, this entertainment medium that we love so much, this thing that we have spent so much of our time and emotions investing ourselves into. It's something that is our escape from the crazy world, especially these days for sure. So the fact that these guys are legitimate wrestling fans who've put out this fantastic comic, it definitely adds some positivity to the pro wrestling industry, which we love so much. Ed, talk to us real quick about your publisher, because you guys started off independent, but then you were able to sign on to a massive publisher here for the comic series going forward. Talk to us about the publisher.
Yeah, so we really were lucky after our, self-publishing for a couple issues. We were signed on by Starburns Industries Press, which I would describe in the comic book world. I would say small press publisher is pretty accurate, but the Starburns Industries itself is this large company that produces a lot of animated television. Rick and Morty actually probably being the biggest thing that they've worked on thus far, but on a lot of other cool stuff as well. And so it was a nice fit for us. I mean, I would describe Invasion from Planet Wrestletopia as sort of an action comedy, and there it has a story with a heart in there, but primarily it's an action comedy, and so we fit right in with sort of their sensibilities as a company. And so we're real excited about that, and especially as we close in on finishing our sixth and final issue. It'll be interesting to see what we can do, with the collected volume of these issues. I mentioned before that each of these individual issues, if you get them on Comixology, they have their own exclusive bonus material. It's really fun, really funny stuff that we put a lot of effort into that won't be in the trade. However, the trade will have the collected volume will have its own exclusive bonus material as well, so you can feel good about buying them all if you so wish. And Starburns Industries has been great to work with, and it's really nice to have a publisher. They do a lot of great stuff for us that we couldn't do on our own. So and we'll just have to wait and see how else we can kind of push, how much further we can push this title towards finding an audience and maybe finding a home in some different mediums and things like that. But it's been great so far.
Well, let's not hold ourselves back any further here. Matt, let everybody know what's the best way they can get their hands on the comic, especially all the issues. I'm sure that this is not the sort of thing where you can just read one or two. You definitely want to check out the entire series, folks. Take it from me. I'm just salivating at what's possible. What could happen next? What's going to go on next in this universe? They even have a wrestling bear. Okay, did you hear what I just said? They even have a wrestling bear. That's a spoiler alert, by the way. But Matt, let everybody know, Invasion from the Planet Wrestletopia, what's the best way that folks can get their hands on this?
Just go to Comixology, that's with an X in the middle, Comixology.com, and you can get all 5 current issues and number 6 when it is finally released, hopefully next month.
If folks want to reach out to you guys and share their thoughts, especially reviews and things of that nature, on the comic once they pick up issues themselves, how can they reach you guys, and how can they reach, this the comic, I should say, universe itself in general?
So our best social media outlet for that would be Twitter, and we are SBP_comics. Suspicious Behavior Productions is the name of our little two-man entity. And we're also on Tumblr at Suspicious Behavior Productions. And Ed, you want to round out the rest?
Well, yeah, we have a Facebook page. Obviously Facebook.com Suspicious Behavior is where you can find us on there. We do have an Instagram. We're really bad about checking, but we're Suspicious Behavior Productions on Instagram, and we'll give us a shout out on there, and we'll try to be a little more active on there. But Twitter especially, and Tumblr, we like to have a lot of fun on there. Give us a shout. Let us know what you think about the comics, or just what you think about wrestling or life in general, or my haircut, or whatever you want to say. Old wrestling, new wrestling. We love to hear from people.
Thank you guys very much. First of all, Invasion from Planet Wrestletopia, great comic, but thank you for respecting the wrestling industry and for actually wearing your fandom on your sleeves. This is great stuff, and I feel like it's something that's going to help even people who may not consider themselves wrestling fans. They'll be able to enjoy this because of the fantastic storytelling and because of the fantastic artwork. You and the team just really did a great job there. Please feel free. We'll start with Matt, then we'll round it out with Ed. Any final thoughts? Anything you want to leave folks with?
Well, I just want to thank you. It's our hope that our comic is able to make comic fans out of wrestling fans and wrestling fans out of comic fans.
Yeah, and I would just say, in hearing you talk about, respecting wrestling and all that stuff, other people, who have sort of reviewed the book have described it as a love letter to wrestling, and I think that's accurate. It really is the great. I mean, I don't follow it religiously like I used to, but it really is the greatest form of entertainment ever devised by humankind. And I'll also say that our publisher is giving away our first issue. I'm reminded. So if there's somebody out there who just, and we're going through some tough times, obviously, as a planet, if you want to score our digital copy of our first issue for free, just give us a shout on our social media, and we'll shoot you the link. We really just wanted to get the story out there. If anyone, is having a tough time and could use a break, just give us, our DMs are open on Twitter or Facebook, whatever. Just give us a shout, and we'll set you up.
Let me tell you something right now. If you respect the pro wrestling business and you're somebody that is putting something out there that folks can enjoy, especially when it's of the high quality that Ed and Matt have put out with their comic, I want to talk to you. I want to have you on the show. I want to feature you. I want to encourage people to check your stuff out, because clearly you have something going on that's worth paying attention to. There's so many folks out there who take shots at pro wrestling and love to focus on negative things, whether they're making it up or whether there's some truth to it. And we really need more positive pro wrestling content out there, diversified pro wrestling content. And that's what you're going to get with Invasion from Planet Wrestletopia. So once again, thank you, Matt. Thank you, Ed. Just great guys there. I'm really excited for all of you listening to check out the comic. It's available right now, issues 1 through 5. I'm going to put all the information up out there, but Comixology, COMIXOLOGY. You can find it there. Please check it out. I enjoyed it so much. I know issue number 6 is coming out soon. I can't wait to read it. But as I stated before in the interview, you're going to love the artwork. It's just so professionally done. The fact that the guy who, created Rick and Morty is also the place where they're doing their publishing and what have you. It's tremendous. Tremendous. And these are video game guys. So you already knew that you're going to get high quality stuff from them. So again, thank you, Matt. Thank you, Ed. I'll definitely be checking in with those guys again soon because they do a great job. That's right. Welcome back. Welcome back to Duke Loves Wrestling Podcast, the show about pro wrestling and everything else. And I hope everyone is doing well out there once again, despite all the craziness in the world. I continue to deliver some content that hopefully you're enjoying, whether you're sick, whether you're healthy, whether you're in between, doesn't matter. This is your stop every week to escape from that crazy reality, right? A little later in the show, I'm going to be speaking to Alexandra Scaffidi, who is a massive MMA fan, especially when it comes to UFC. But because of her work experience, she has some thoughts on safety, especially during this COVID-19 pandemic and how UFC is putting on events. So she has some interesting perspective. And what's really interesting is the fact that she is hearing impaired. She's deaf. So for the first time here on the Duke Loves Wrestling podcast, I am utilizing a text-to-speech program to speak on behalf of my guest who actually, she sent me responses to some questions that I had. She sent it to me in an email. So I'm going to use a text-to-speech program so you can hear what Alexandra Scaffidi has to say, and it's really some great stuff there. I think you folks are going to enjoy it. But before we get to any of that, let me go over some top stories and just share some thoughts because there's a lot that's happened since the last time I spoke to you a week ago. And we could start with the WWE Money in the Bank pay-per-view. It happened. No fans. We're talking about a pay-per-view where the headlining match, the Money in the Bank ladder match, happened on the roof of WWE headquarters in Stamford, Connecticut. Now, according to my research, it's about a 7-story building. WWE was saying it was a 10-story building, which is interesting. Okay, maybe they added some stories. Who knows? But overall, it was for me, it wasn't the best pay-per-view I've seen. But I understand the circumstances. The expectations are not as high as they should be, at least in what we would consider normal times. But overall, there was great effort by all the competitors, and I think that the WWE, they put their best foot forward as much as they could, but it's just, it's a tough deal. It's a tough deal to put on a entertaining pay-per-view that lasts 3, 4, 5 hours long, grab everyone's attention when the presentation is just so different from what we have been conditioned to be used to our entire lives. So it's always going to be a challenge to watch, even on TV. It's going to be a challenge to watch this stuff, but it's important to go through these growing pains because it's pushing innovation. And I really liked the concept of the Money in the Bank ladder match being on the roof of WWE headquarters. That's just something different. They literally put a ring on top of their building, and they had the ladders in the ring. And the competitors, the men and the women, they had their matches at the same time, where they had to start at the bottom level of WWE headquarters, and they were running through all the different floors and getting all the way up to the top, and then battled each other until we had winners. So the winner of the women's Money in the Bank ladder match was Asuka. Thank goodness. I really appreciated that because, folks, the Duke's a big fan of Asuka. Nobody's ready for Asuka. That's right. That's right. So I was pretty happy to see that she won. And the winner for the men, surprisingly, was Otis. Otis, of all people, was the men's Money in the Bank ladder match winner. Did not see that coming. Crazy. So the stipulation, and traditionally with Money in the Bank, whoever grabs the briefcase there's a contract inside the briefcase that they can cash in, quote unquote, at any time for the next year for an opportunity to battle for whatever championship that they choose to battle for. So the next night on Monday Night Raw, Becky Lynch comes out, and she has the Money in the Bank briefcase. What the heck is she doing with the briefcase? That's Asuka's briefcase. What's going on here? But Becky makes an announcement. She is taking time off because Becky Lynch, the man, is pregnant. Now, I know what you're thinking. You're thinking what I'm thinking. How the heck can a man be pregnant? I mean, literally not since Arnold Schwarzenegger in that movie that he was in where he woke up and he was pregnant. We haven't seen that before. So now suddenly the man, Becky Lynch, is pregnant. I don't know how this is possible. I don't know what science is doing where they can make the man pregnant, but that's what she claims. So we'll leave it at that. Fine. So then she tells Asuka to come out, and Becky opens the Money in the Bank briefcase to reveal that the Raw Women's Championship was inside the briefcase, and because Asuka won the Money in the Bank ladder match, she officially is the Raw Women's Champion. That was a special stipulation that was not revealed during the pay-per-view. It was revealed on Raw the next night, which was really smart. Really, really smart booking on the part of WWE. And in fact, it literally crashed the internet. Everybody was talking about it. Raw trended number one. Becky Lynch, Asuka, they all trended number one at various points throughout the night. It was good stuff. And of course, Asuka being Asuka, she celebrated, she danced, she gave Becky a hug, which was kind of interesting. She Asuka was just so excited, so happy, which was cool. And I think these two really like each other. So I believe that, and Asuka even expressed this, Becky seems to be appreciative of the fact that if she's going to deliver the belt to anybody, delivering it to Asuka is definitely the right way to go, because Asuka will take that championship and uphold the standard of what a WWE Raw Women's Champion should be. So everybody wins in that situation. And congratulations to Becky and Seth Rollins. Good luck with you two and your endeavors on this road to being parents. It's good stuff. I don't know if Seth Rollins is going to take time off as well, but Becky, she's gone for now. That's official. Now, I got to tell you, I want to give a side note here. Shout out to Shayna Baszler. She put out a statement saying, how stupid can you be to get pregnant while you're champion? I thought that was hilarious. 100% heel, right? And then she said, do you know you see who that kid's father is? That kid's going to suck. Which was another thing. And Shayna Baszler just healing it up, man. That's a whole other story. Some folks took exception to that, which is fine. It's pro wrestling, folks. Come on. Obviously, she wasn't being serious. She was talking about Becky Lynch, the character, not Rebecca Lynch, the person and the real mom. Come on, folks. That's a built-in feud that can happen whenever Becky drops the baby, is back healthy, and is ready to wrestle again. That's a built-in feud that'll be ready to happen. Shayna Baszler will be waiting for her. That's right. That's right. Now, on the other side, as I said, Otis is the men's Money in the Bank winner, and he's on SmackDown, so we'll have to wait and find out what he has to say about that. But he's in that storyline with Mandy Rose, so that'll be interesting. It'll be interesting to see what happens. Otis has been very popular lately. That Mandy Rose storyline has hit lightning in a bottle and it's taken off, and that's great for them. But I got to tell you something, folks. I'm very confused. Both the men's and the women's Money in the Bank ladder matches, not a single black wrestler was in either one of those matches. I just don't understand it. And I broached the topic, and a few people said, well, hey, Duke, just because you're black doesn't mean you should be in the Money in the Bank ladder match or you should be in the main event. And I agree with that. But there are some talented black wrestlers in the WWE. Kofi Kingston and Big E and Lashley, right? Come on. You mean to tell me none of those guys could have been in that match? Really? R-Truth? Look at R-Truth. R-Truth has been the MVP of the WWE over the past year. With what he did with that 24/7 championship, it's just been incredible what he has helped the WWE do. What if he won the Money in the Bank ladder match? Don't you think that would be more compelling to see R-Truth figure out when he's going to cash in and how? And hey, imagine if R-Truth actually became Universal Champion or WWE Champion. You're going to tell me the fans wouldn't buy that? That would be an incredible moment at a major pay-per-view. But you gave it to Otis. You gave it to Otis. And I'm sure it's going to help Otis get over. And yeah, you do need to create new stars, so I'm not against that. I just don't understand, of all the people, why he has to be in that spot right now. So, I'm just expressing my disappointment, my frustration as that relates. And on the women's side, where was Bianca Belair? Where was Naomi? Why were there no black women in that match? It just doesn't make any sense. Sasha Banks didn't even wrestle the whole pay-per-view. She was on the outside for Bayley's match against Tamina, which is a whole other story. I mean, it just, I don't understand it. I think it's poor form on whoever wrote that pay-per-view, whoever booked it. They need to get it together. That's right. Speaking of getting it together, Alberto Del Rio, or Alberto El Patron, as he likes to call himself. He was arrested on a domestic violence charge, and his girlfriend, she put in a police report that Alberto had held her against her will and tied her up and sexually assaulted her and accused her of cheating on him and beat her up and did all kinds of crazy things, choked her and all. Oh my God, just horrific stuff, folks. You would think you were just reading that report. You thought you were reading some kind of horror novel or something. To think that a human being could be that monstrous and just, disgusting, reprehensible. And I'm going to tell you something. I don't know what happened. And yes, we are going to wait for the facts to come out, and everybody should have their day in court. No two ways about that. But I'm going to tell you something. Alberto Del Rio has this cloud hanging over him. And these allegations of domestic violence have been following him throughout his life. Whether he beat his brother bloody in Mexico, the whole stuff with Paige, him showing up with knife marks all over himself and stuff, she beating him up in the airport, which, there were witnesses that saw her do it, and she admitted she assaulted him. But was she defending herself? I mean, you have to go back and you have to ask these questions. I don't know what's up with Alberto. But I'm going to tell you one thing. I'm having a hard time defending the guy. And I have defended the guy based on the facts that were available at the time. But, Alberto, you're running out of my ability and even interest in defending you because something's not right. There's too much smoke here, brother. I would hope that you aren't such a monster, such a piece of trash that you would have done what is outlined in that police report. But I can't imagine that somebody's going to make that up. So we're going to see. And my heart goes out to the survivor of the domestic abuse. She and her son and the rest of her family, they got a tough road ahead of them, just having to see this thing through and then whatever happens afterwards. She's not a pro wrestler. She's not a big-time celebrity, international superstar like he is. So you're going to have people who are going to try to pile on her and try to discredit her and things of that nature. It's really just, it's ugly to see. It's ugly. But if Alberto is guilty of this stuff and it ain't looking too good for him, I hope they throw every book on the planet after him. Just Throw the book at him. Because a person like that does not need to be walking around in society. God only knows what could have happened. Could have killed that woman. If, in fact, this is all true. So, I'll definitely update that story. It's disappointing, folks, because I was checking my archives. Next week is the 4-year anniversary of Duke Loves Wrestling podcast. I was checking my archives and found one of the older episodes where we were talking about the whole Paige and Alberto situation, and it seemed like every other week there was more information on that. And somebody asked me the other day, well, does this make you look at Paige differently now? And, it does. Absolutely it does. And I don't take back what I said in the past about Paige assaulting Alberto. There were witnesses. That actually happened. A woman had video and what have you of at least Paige on audio and you name it, beating him up at an airport. But I tell you, I have to go back and think about it. What if she was defending herself? That puts a little wrinkle in the whole scenario now, doesn't it? Huh. I don't know. But it's ugly. It's ugly because it's just another black eye on the wrestling industry. It's a black eye on society. You never want to hear about somebody being brutalized, especially at the hands of somebody else. It's just terrible. So we'll see what happens there, folks, but I don't know. I'll tell you, the man formerly known as Killer Cross, I think he goes by Karrion Kross now, he's definitely making a splash out there. Certainly is. NXT is heating up with this guy. I don't know if he's some kind of vampire or whatever he's got going on, he and his lady, but that whole package it's catching on, man. People are enjoying it. And I love to see that. It'll be interesting to see when Roman Reigns comes back, because I told you folks from 2-3 years ago, I would love to see, at the time his name was Killer Cross, Karrion Kross, whatever you want to call himself, Chili Willy. I would love to see Cross destroy that no good Roman Reigns. So hopefully we can make that happen sooner than later. And Cross, I know you're listening. Let me tell you something, bro. I got a shiny nickel in my pocket with your name on it. Okay? Take the money, as Harley Race would say. I will give you a shiny nickel if you destroy that punk Roman Reigns. He's my arch nemesis. He and I got problems dating from way back. I need you to finish him off for me. We'll talk about that offline, though. That's right. Sami Zayn was stripped of the Intercontinental Championship. Stripped. Unlike Becky Lynch, he didn't show up on Raw and do a presentation to anybody. The WWE stripped him of the title. Now, there's speculation that Sami Zayn is refusing to compete during this COVID-19 crisis. And WWE, people have accused WWE of making a public spectacle out of, quote unquote, punishing Sami Zayn by stripping him of the title. Let me say this. Sami Zayn is a heel right now in the storylines, right? This gives him something to complain about. Or this turns him babyface, stripping him of the title. So I'm not so quick to jump on the bandwagon and condemn the WWE for stripping him of the title. I think there's a storyline thing going on here. And I would hope that the WWE is not punishing Sami Zayn because he's doing the safe thing and not competing during this COVID-19 crisis. Because, Roman Reigns is doing the same exact thing. Becky Lynch basically is doing the same thing too. So what's the difference? So I would hope that they wouldn't be punishing Sami Zayn. I don't think that's the case, to be honest with you. I think a lot of you folks out there, you're looking for something to complain about when you are so devoid of the facts, it's not even funny. And it just, at some point, you got to wonder, what's the real agenda here? It's like some of you out there that like to exclaim how the WWE's in trouble. They're in trouble. Are they really? They're expanding their partnerships on television. That India deal just kicked in, so that money's coming in. I was listening to WrestleNomics the other day, and shout out to Brandon Howard Thurston III. You know, he's been on the show before. Good guy. And Brandon pointed out that the WWE is going to gross more money now than previously expected for the year 2020 because they're not doing the live events. So they're saving on those costs. And that translates over to an increase of another $100 million for the year. So they're going to set a gross record in 2020. They're going to make more money in gross than they ever had before because their production costs are down. And that TV money is coming in. And if they don't do another live event, it's not going to matter. They're still going to they're going to be in the black, as we say, not in the red. Disney can't say that. Disney's losing money hand over fist because their theme parks are down. So even though they have all these other divisions, their theme parks aren't there. So they can't get the money off the tickets and the rides, and they can't get the money off the merch that they sell throughout their various theme parks in the world. Think about that. I think they only have about 1 or 2 theme parks open right now. That's it. But the WWE is making money hand over fist. That's not a company that's in trouble, folks. That's a company that thrives. If you can do better during a pandemic, if you can do better during the periods of time where everybody else is not doing so well, you know what that says? You're not just a survivor, you're a thriver. That's not trouble. Somebody needs to invest in that company. You should buy more of their stock before it goes back up, because that's what's exactly happening right now. So, and that's not to say that I agree with every move they make, because certainly I don't. I've called the company out for years. I point out what I like and I point out what I don't like, right? But you got to be honest about it. And I'm telling you right now, from a business standpoint, the WWE is doing it just as well, if not better, than any other entertainment company that you can think of right now. That's not in trouble. That is amazing. That's right. That's right. Okay, folks, let's not belabor the point here. Let me just jump right into it, because my guest, Alexandra Scaffidi, okay, and once again, this is a huge mixed martial arts fan. She loves the UFC in particular, and she had plenty to say about UFC 249. So let me back up here. On Saturday, the UFC put on the first live sporting event in America in something like over 50 days or something like that. You know, since this COVID-19 crisis, we haven't had live sports. We've had pro wrestling, you know, WWE and what have you, AEW, but we haven't had live sports, competitive sports. So the UFC, they're the first. And a lot of folks, you know, they had some questions about the process and how they did this. And Alex, she's fantastic. A lot of analysis here, and I reached out to her and said, hey, listen, I want you to come on the show and talk about this, because on her Twitter feed, she was just firing off, man. And the who's who in mixed martial arts media, they were responding and sharing her thoughts and what have you. It was pretty interesting. And then Alex revealed to me that although she'd love to come on the show, she's hearing impaired. In her words, she's deaf. So that may make things a little challenging there. And let me tell you something, folks. This is an inclusive show. So the challenge of how do I innovate? How do I make this more accessible? I did some research and I came up with something. It's like, all right, let me get a text-to-speech program, and I'll send Alex the questions and she can respond. And, you know, I asked her if that was okay, and she said, sure, let's do it. And so here we are. So you are going to hear the text-to-speech program responding, and I'm just going to ask the questions and play the responses. And these are Alex's words, mind you. And let's see how this goes, man. I'm pretty excited about it. So Welcome to the Duke Loves Wrestling podcast. Once again, Alexandra Scaffidi. And Alex, I'm just going to jump right into it because, UFC 249 was the hot topic that you were discussing on Twitter. So first of all, what specifically were your concerns regarding safety as it relates to UFC 249 and how it was affected by the COVID-19 global pandemic?
I'm concerned that fighters will be immunocompromised during their weight cuts, as well as after the fights themselves, which puts them at greater risk. Serena de Jesus has been vocal about sharing that, herself. Some fighters have fallen ill after really hard fights, because their immune systems are compromised, due to the stress, and other factors. Fighters traveling unnecessarily puts themselves and others at risk. I have not seen nor heard about fighters being paid more for taking fights during the pandemic, excluding undisclosed fighting bonuses. Testing has been questionable and not completely reliable. In addition, I'm concerned with these new waivers that the fighters have been signing, which seem to exempt the UFC from liability if a fighter, or their family members, get sick with COVID-19. Another concern is the UFC has not followed up with all of the safety protocols that they themselves released. I saw that they had done interviews inside the octagon during the event, despite UFC originally stating they would not do this. Are they pre-screening everyone in attendance before traveling to Jacksonville? If not, that would be an example of inadequate screening methods.
Alex, how does your line of work affect your perspective on the matter? Because this is the thing. I mean, when you have certain experiences, that definitely may change how you look at something that most people wouldn't even give a second glance to. So again, how does your line of work affect your position on the matter?
I'm very biased in my opinion that fights shouldn't be held right now. As an essential worker, I work with hospitals in organizing PPE donations and dealing with supply chain support. And as a COVID-19 screener, I am also a residential youth worker. Right now, anyone who is following health and safety protocols, with staying home and maintaining social distance, while avoiding unnecessary travel, is making it safer for essential service workers to do their jobs. It personally frustrates me that some people think sports are above the pandemic we are facing. I understand wanting to have some normalcy, but that's what Fight Pass is for. Get creative and do some viewing parties with events you haven't seen before. Any reason to host events right now is selfish.
UFC's pay structure appears to keep the rich rich, and those who don't get paid so much remain in their spot. So, do you feel they should change the structure, especially during this COVID-19 pandemic? And if so, why or why not?
Absolutely. Fighters are assuming the most, if not all the risk. They should be paid accordingly for taking those risks. Essential service workers received a raise during this pandemic, so if the UFC deems their business as essential enough to host events, then they should be paying their fighters accordingly. I'll always maintain that fighters already do not get paid enough for what they do.
In your opinion, should MMA companies like UFC, should they even be running events during the COVID-19 pandemic?
No, for all of the reasons I explained before, and additionally because as doctors and epidemiologists have explained in interviews with The Athletic and Bloody Elbow, it's just not a good idea.
Do you have any other points that you'd like to add to the conversation, Alex? Here's your chance to, bring it on home, so to speak.
I'd like to add that I personally am not trying to place the blame on fighters during this time. The UFC is offering the opportunity to make a paycheck, and fighters are taking that opportunity. They are already largely underpaid as it is, so I can't fault them for signing a contract, and I sympathize with them. That being said, they're not the only ones out of a paycheck and having a hard time right now. Nothing makes any of them better than anyone else who is out of work right now. I also don't agree with fighters sharing misinformation and dangerous sentiments about the virus to their audience on their platforms. I sincerely hope that with the events coming up, fighters take every single necessary precaution and stay as safe as they can.
And there you have it, folks. Alex Scaffidi, and you can find her on Twitter and read all of her great takes. Once again, I know a lot of folks in the MMA community, the journalists, the fans, the fighters, they're definitely popping up on her Twitter feed there. That's at Alex, ALEXSCAFFIDI_. Alex Scaffidi. Fantastic. And again, folks, if you are, or you know anyone who is hearing impaired, who is deaf, they are more than welcome to be a guest on Duke Loves Wrestling podcast, especially if they have a take on pro wrestling or MMA and boxing. If they want to share their take on any of that stuff, just shoot me a line at Duke Loves Wrestling, either on Twitter, Facebook, or at Duke Loves Wrestling on Gmail. They're more than welcome to come on the show. Well, let's push this. And I'm going to find a way to develop some transcripts for the show so people can read it and what have you. We'll find a way. We'll find a way to continue to make this as accessible as possible. Got to innovate, baby. That's right. Folks, next week is the official 4-year anniversary of the Duke Loves Wrestling podcast. And I got some exciting things lined up. Got a great guest. Got somebody who you haven't heard from in a while who's going to be back. Actually, a couple of somebodies. So that should be crazy. I'm thinking about either in addition doing some kind of video presentation, or at least a portion of the show will be recorded with video. So we'll see. Everybody's out there doing Zoom and all these other things. Some of you out there, you got your kids in the background acting crazy, body slamming each other, putting their feet in the camera. Craziness. But I'm thinking of taking advantage of some of that stuff and doing something special for the 4-year anniversary. So definitely tune in next week and you'll get to see something fun. Please send me any messages, questions, comments, you name it, at Duke Loves Wrestling. Obviously, please send in the reviews, especially if you love the show or even if you hate the show. Give me a 5-star review. Come on. This might be the show that you love to hate. I was on the Old Man Wade show last week, taking on Javi, Super Woke Javi, where we were discussing wrestling and politics and things of that nature. And, the whole room was against me, which I don't mind. Because in the words of the great Ric Flair, only one of you can be first, but you all can be next. And everybody knows that Duke doesn't shy away from a debate, baby. That's right. So once again, folks, please be kind to yourselves and be kind to others. I appreciate you. I am thinking about all of you. We've been through a lot, folks, especially these last couple of months. But if you're going to keep tuning in, I'm going to keep churning out these shows for you. Again, we're in this together. So please be safe. Join us next week for the 4-year anniversary. Until then, take it away, Tony Schiavone.
Mr. Tony Schiavone, and we're desperately out of time on Duke Loves Wrestling.